Well, like Yogi said, this is deja vu all over again, right? So, good evening, folks, and welcome back to another episode of When It Was Real. The show focuses on the glory days of the WWF in the 1970s. It's a perfect time to grow up as a professional wrestling fan. Now, I'm just a carnival barker trying to get people to come into the tent, but this other guy, he's the featured attraction. He wrote the wonderful book that our show is named after. And Nikita, how are you, my friend?
Well, I got to tell you real quick, with our guest going to be introduced, George provided the cover shot to Scott Teal. That's your picture, George. That's February 19th, 1979, Backlund against Valentine. You took the shot and you gave it to Scott Teal. So, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only, the great George Napolitano.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction.
Yes. George, welcome. I was going to say that you're actually in 2 professional wrestling Hall of Fames, correct?
Yes.
All right. So, yeah, welcome. And what we have to do real quick is just do a little bit of business here and then pay the bills. And then we're going to get started here. Here we go.
Beautiful.
This is Benny Scala, the one and only player. Folks, I am beyond excited to be co-hosting this new show, When It Was Real. And I am just as excited to be announcing our new sponsor, the Free Spirited Company. Free Spirited is a phenomenal old-school clothing company that specializes in short and long-sleeve T-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, graphic tees, heck, even yoga pants. These T-shirts are, to quote Rocky's manager Mickey Goldmill, a wake of art. Yours truly will be rocking the Free Spirited merch on each and every episode of When It Was Real. Not only are these shirts eye-catching, but they are very comfortable as well. Like what you see? Please go to shopfreespirited.com and use our special code MP20 to receive a 20% discount on all purchases. Again, that is shopfreespirited.com, and that code is MP20. As the poet laureate of the Monte The Pharaoh YouTube channel, I will leave you with this. If you like what you see, go buy a tee. Heck, maybe 2 or 3. When your friends tell you, hey, you look like the bomb, send them over to shopfreespirited.com. All right, here's my merch.
There you go.
Yep, I'm tie-dyed, sexified, but not yet petrified, thank God. So I think the best way to approach this historic match is to first talk about the buildup of the match itself, and then the aftermath. Now, normally I have a bunch of scripted questions, but with 2 iconic historians here, I'm just going to kick back and soak in the history. I'm going to be like, what did Antonino Rocco say? General, I'm going to just take my shoes off. Did he say? I think he said that, right?
Oh,
That's what I'm going to take my sneakers off. So, Nikita, if you could give our listeners some of the buildup leading up to this historic match, and George, please feel free to do run-ins as appropriate.
All right, thank you.
Now, George, better than anybody, it started in 76. Superstar hadn't been gone all that long. His last match that I have him is May 24th at the Capitol Center. Monsoon beat him on a countout. This is 76 now. Then Bruno already had the broken neck. They bring him back that quickly to 1977, this date, the anniversary, April 30th. Now, what I have here is the mailing program that Capitol Wrestling used to send. Sammartino to Battle Graham. There was a Battle Royal that night, but they said Superstar got a waiver because he said, I want to meet Bruno. I don't want to be tired from the Battle Royal. I want to get in there fresh. So, as the fans, we bought it. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. That's good.
See, but where I was, we didn't hear this because they would only advertise locally. You might have seen this in the Washington area or in Baltimore on the TV.
Baltimore, yes.
And they would put the promos according to where the town is. If you lived in New York, you were not going to hear promos for Baltimore. So we did not hear anything about that.
Now, the reason, folks, we brought George in tonight was because, and he's going to tell you how this played out that night, on the way to the Civic Center. How did it all play out with George and Superstar?
Okay. Well, people who say they know, I knew, nobody really knows. If they tell you, they don't tell you directly. I was driving with Superstar, and he says to, okay, I'll just back up a bit. I drove Superstar to Baltimore. He says, I got a big match. Take me. And I used to be his, quote, chauffeur, unquote.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I used to drive him around to many of the towns. So we're driving in the car to Baltimore, and he says, I hope you have a lot of film tonight. And I said, film? Why? And well, it's another thing. Film as opposed to digital. Film was on 36 exposures on a roll. He says, I hope you have a lot of rolls of film tonight. I says, how many do I need for you and Bruno? I've seen that match many times, and I don't need any more pictures of you and Bruno. He says, this one might be different. I says, come on. How different can it be? We're going to Baltimore. We're not going to be in Madison Square Garden. He says, you better have a lot of film. Be ready. That was what I was told. That's what I knew. Be ready. I don't know what I was being ready for other than wasting my film. And
Now, the tip-off that we didn't understand as fans, George, when we walked in the building, and there's a camera up on the stage, because they only used one camera. They didn't even have a roving, like, handheld.
No.
They just had the one tripod up on the stage, and Vince is there. And it's like, what the hell? You know? I mean, we were smart, but we weren't that smart. But there's no way the belt's going to change hands tonight. It's just not going to happen. Nobody would think that would happen.
You never thought of it anywhere. Maybe if it was going to happen, it would happen in Madison Square Garden if something happened. With Madison Square Garden being the monthly show, which was actually the, quote, pay-per-view, unquote. Every time there was the Garden show, it was like having a pay-per-view.
Amen.
It was the blow off of what you had seen prior to that. And that's before the big pay-per-views happened, way before. Now, Vince was there, and there was a camera. But I'll tell you, I seen the camera, I seen Vince. I still didn't put anything together other than I'm here, I'm driving Superstar.
Now, yeah, because you never know what they have up their sleeve. It's like, okay, so they're here. So
it was better that way. That you didn't know what's up their sleeve.
But why Baltimore and why not the Garden? Why did they choose Baltimore? Why not Philly? Why not Boston? Why Baltimore?
Because a lot of times they'll do it out of the way place, so they're always afraid there's going to be a, quote, riot. You know, they were expecting people were going to revolt or get mad or yell, have some kind of riot in Baltimore if Bruno, the hero, went down.
Well, I can give you a good answer to that, to both of you guys. This was the next month's program, and it's a letter from the Maryland State Athletic Commission. There was a deal in Maryland. Once an official makes a decision, it cannot be overturned.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, remember, Brody did it in the Garden. He had the feet on the ropes. They rang it, but then it was like, no. The judges at ringside reversed the decision. Remember that, George?
Yeah.
When Brody was there. So it's like, all right, Bruno is going to get beat, but he wants to keep the heat. You know, he doesn't want it to be a clean finish. How the hell are we going to do this? You can't do it in New York. So Baltimore made good sense, right? Because now it's like, hey, nobody ever saw Philly had Pedro lose to Stasiak.
Stasiak, yeah.
But other than that, it was always the Garden.
Same reason you don't want Pedro to lose in the Garden?
Yeah, the Garden being the Mecca, being the big show, being a pay-per-view event idea. You know.
Well, and we covered Pedro Nikita. He never lost a match in the Garden, right, during his whole championship reign?
Yes.
Right. George, you know better than anybody. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? See, I did now, George, when you saw this happen, did Superstar say to you, let's get the hell out of here? Or what did
he actually didn't. As soon as the match was over and the referee raises his arm, Arnold Skolin is standing on the ring apron, yelling, whatever he was doing, he was yelling. And Graham just ran out of the ring, went to the back. I go to the back to follow him, hoping to get a picture with the belt. And he says, we got to get out of here. I says, what's the matter? He says, we got to leave right now. So he got into my car, unlike what they said that he was dressed, showered, got into my car in the clothes he was wearing. We went and took the turnpike back to New York. And we had a party. How he celebrated was in the rest stop, exit 7 on the Georgia Turnpike.
Hey,
wow.
He was in his tights.
Beautiful. And he's probably bleeding like crazy from the head wound.
Yeah, he was bleeding, man. I believe there's a photo that I sent you with the arm up.
Yes.
The referee.
Hang on. Let me see if I can find that here real quick.
Not, I've got it in the Action magazine. You know, the funny part was, for the people that haven't seen it, the referee, Jack Davis, Bruno handed him the belt. And that's unusual. It's like he didn't know what the hell to do with it. So he tucked it under his arm and he starts checking him over, because it's like usually Skolin takes the belt. But that night, of course, they knew what the finish was. But the referee maybe didn't. And he's like, all right, I got the belt. What the hell? You know, I'll just hold on to it. It was wild.
And there's Arnold Skolin on the ring apron in the back.
You know, I watched the match again today. Two things that I noticed. One is that,
good.
yeah, one is that it was about the 11-minute mark is when Bruno threw a slam Superstar into the ring post, falls out of the ring, comes back in, and now he's bleeding like a stuck pig. But the referee never, you know, back in the day, how many matches were stopped because of blood, right? That happened all the time. But he never checked, Jack Davis never checked Graham for the cuts. But I did notice at the very end when Bruno had Superstar in the corner and he's pummeling him, he keeps looking at the referee, almost like, you know, the referee was supposed to step in between the two of them so, you know, Billy could hook his leg. And it took quite a bit. It almost seemed like maybe I'm just my imagination. It almost seemed like Bruno was frustrated this guy wasn't getting in between the two of them.
Yeah, well, it's hard to read into it 48 years later.
Right.
What was on their mind and what was really going on.
It almost seemed like Bruno was like raising his hands, like, come on already. Like that's what I saw. But who knows? Like you said, you know, 48 years ago.
I have not seen that match since that night.
Wow.
I was there. Yeah, I have not seen it. I really have never seen it.
It's actually, I mean, was it a 13-minute match?
Something like that. But it almost ended before it ended, because what Benny's talking about, I don't know where you may have been on the other side of the ring, George, but when Superstar hit the post and then he went down, one of the chairs from the state athletic commissioners was empty. His leg went into it. He was lucky he didn't break his leg or twist his ankle or knee or whatever. It's like, holy shit. Because, you know, they always had to be there to state athletic commissioner. Somebody went to go to the bathroom or get a drink, and they got an empty chair, and Superstar landed on it.
See, it's good to watch it on full, big. I'm looking at everything through this little hole. That's my view. Through the camera eye, through the little hole.
Yes.
I don't see everything around me. I got to worry about the cameraman and chairs or whatever is around me. That's what I got to look out for. And I don't have the privilege of looking at it fully and seeing what's going on, because I'm looking at a little hole in the back of my camera. Now you look at the screen, some of these people.
Right.
On the cameras, you're looking at the screen. You might be able to see a little bit more. But everything I seen was through this little hole. And I needed to do the stuff really quickly. So I didn't have time to sit down at my TV and rewatch 3 hours of a show when I got to get a magazine out.
Yes. And thank you for the magazines you did put out, George, because we used to subscribe to you. We would,
oh my God,
go to the stands, and you can't wait for the next issues to come out. You know, it was just wonderful.
I used to. I would walk home from junior high school to the same luncheonette in Farmingdale, New York, and I knew exactly where the magazines were, and my eyes would just rivet right to where they were. And if I saw a new magazine, that was it. You know, so thank you for that. I mean, that was my entertainment for years growing up.
Yeah, I've been told that the magazines help people learn to read.
Probably, yeah. Why not? That was great. And
Hey,
yours were
whatever
the more
works.
sensible ones, George. That's what we like the most. Not goofy stories. You're just telling
Yeah,
results and what
I used
happened.
to tell it the way it was, what you've seen. I didn't make up stories. Anything that I was quoted was quoted. If it was outlandish and crazy, it's what they said, other than what I said. I didn't make it up. I just used their crazy stories and ideas and themes. And that's if that was the interview I was given, that's the interview that I wrote the story based on.
Yeah, those other magazines, they were really fakakta stories. Like, where'd they come up with this? Even I, as a young fan, it's like, wow, it almost felt like reading like a detective magazine or something like that.
Yeah. See, I met Superstar before he came to New York. I met him in Houston, Texas in 76 or so, 75, 76, in Houston at Paul Bosch's shows. And I wrote a couple stories about him, and he answered. Well, then you would call. Everything was on the telephone. He called me to thank me, and that's the first time he came to New York. Was he said, "I'm going to be doing a bodybuilding competition, the WBBF, World Bodybuilding Federation."
Yes.
He was a bodybuilder, and that picture you just showed was
Let me put it up again here.
first time he came to New York. He was in a muscle competition, but unfortunately, his legs were not as good as the muscular guys.
Right.
And he was always
Yeah, the chest, I mean, the upper body is phenomenal, but yeah, the legs weren't quite up to par with the rest of it.
He was a little embarrassed over his legs, and he always wore long pants, long tights in the ring.
Right. Well, he did get inducted into the Bodybuilder Hall of Fame that Dan Laurie had up in New York.
And that was the World Bodybuilding Federation was from Dan Laurie.
Yes.
He was the one in charge, WBBF. And
well, I tell you,
so he called me, and I picked him up and drove him to that competition, so the bodybuilding competition. And then when he went back, he said, "I think I'm going to be back here pretty soon." And within a couple of weeks, he called us to tell me that he was flying into Kennedy and he was going to be joining the WWWF. And I picked him up at the airport, and that's how I became his chauffeur. He needed to go somewhere, and many times I would drive him if it was drivable, if it was in the area, if it was in the territory. I went as far driving him to as far as Boston. Many times we went up to Boston or down to Baltimore. I didn't do the main shots and that. Once he got there, he would find someone else to drive him around. But I drove him a lot. And
but that's a good camaraderie, though, George. You know, it was more than that. You were definitely a friend.
well, that's what it turned out to be. I became his friend, and he used to use my house as his mailing address. He used to live in a hotel. He would live at the Howard Johnson in New York City when he was in the area in the New York territory. That's before he got a place he got a place in Long Beach in Long Island.
Okay.
That's where he finally got a house. But he used my home address as his mailing address, and I would get all kinds of crazy crap for him and deliver it to him.
I can only imagine.
Usually I would deliver it to him on a Tuesday at Philadelphia every couple of weeks if I hadn't seen him. That being the TV taping, being on Tuesday in Philly before it became Allentown.
He was definitely larger than life, though. I mean, just looking at him, remember the first time he came back with the tie-dyed shirt. It's like, oh my God, this is like, I mean, Bruno was Superman, but this guy wasn't too far away.
Yeah, and that's what made the attraction so much to the fans. He was a villain, and at that point, you didn't cheer the bad guys. You usually stayed with the good guys, but he was starting to get a lot of response from the people, and the WWF didn't know how to handle it because they weren't so into characters changing from bad to good as much as later became.
Right, that rarely happened back then.
Yeah, And so they really didn't know how to handle him. So they gave him a length of time and said, and then they brought in Bob Backlund. It went from him to Howdy Doody.
It was hard not to like. I mean, even as a fan, I mean, Bruno was my hero growing up, but it was hard not to really to like Billy Graham. With he's so charismatic, and
well,
I mean,
it was the 70s. He was perfect for the decade, and for the time that he was in. His colorful clothes, the outfits, the things he would do, his sing-song promos, which then brings me back to another story. When I picked him up one night, and it was a Tuesday, because Tuesday we would see wrestling from Florida in Channel 47 in New York. And I said, "You want to see some wrestling?" He said, Yeah. And I put on the Florida wrestling. He sits on the chair, and he brings the chair right on top of the TV. And he's looking in. Who comes on? Dusty Rhodes. And Dusty Rhodes went crazy, started talking. And he says, he stole my promo. He stole my promo. Because at that time, you didn't know what anyone else was doing in the other territories. Everything was just territorial, just the same little area around. So you didn't know what Dusty Rhodes was doing in Florida if you lived in New York at that time. Even he was a little mad that Dusty stole, and according to him, stole his promo.
Well, he was doing a lot of, when he won the belt, Superstar, then he was still making trips to Florida.
Yeah.
And he was working with Rhodes. And then, because really, when Rhodes hit the Garden, he hadn't been on television yet.
Yep. He had the match at the Orange Bowl. In Florida
with Harley Race.
With Harley Race, yeah, that was a big deal. I went out to Florida. I went to the Orange Bowl. He says, "You're gonna come and see me. You're gonna come." Okay, I come, and I went to the Orange Bowl to see Superstar, and it was a torrential downpour.
Yeah, it was a nasty night, right?
Standing there at ringside, getting soaked in my camera. I said, at some point, I said, "I can't take this no more." I wasn't afraid for me. I was afraid for my camera.
Yeah.
I went back in the dressing room because I kind of knew no title was going to happen. He wasn't going to win the NWA title, or Race was not going to win the WWF title.
But George, was there a little concern because they had Monsoon as a referee?
And again, watching that match. I'm sorry.
Was there any concern of a double cross that may come? That's why they had one person from the Fed and one person from the NWA as a ref.
It's good to say, yeah, that's what they thought, but I wouldn't know for sure. It made it more important. It made it, but
give it credibility, yeah.
And that's what you did all the time. Then you try to make it credible. You tried to make it real as it could be at that time.
And we as fans believed. We loved it. We wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
And we were able to.
Watching that match this morning, and when I think right about the 1 minute mark, they did the test of strength. And that lasted, I timed it for 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And the crowd was like very vocal the entire time, because at first Superstar got Bruno down to the point where, the referee was counting his shoulders. And then, of course, Bruno slowly makes the comeback and does the same thing. But, nowadays, like WWE, they couldn't do that for 10 seconds without somebody saying boring. But for 2 minutes, almost 3 whole minutes, they had the crowd totally captivated just with and then they did like the top wrist lock, did the same thing for another couple of minutes. Same thing. The crowd was like, everything they did, the crowd popped for. Yeah.
Well, today, how many times do you see a count out? Never. How many times do you see a disqualification? Never.
Draw.
These were a big deal. Disqualification. You would come back and have a return match due to the disqualification. Or, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. George, do you know what the relationship between Bruno and Superstar was like?
I can say I knew, but I don't think Bruno was, according to Bruno, Superstar wasn't a wrestler. In Bruno's mind, he wasn't a wrestler. in the true sense of wrestling. He was more of a showman.
Mm.
And he was more of a showman than as a mat technician. Bruno liked to wrestle guys who were technicians, who knew holds, who wrestled. That's what Bruno's favorite were.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, there
Because
weren't
I
too
always
many
got the
wrestling
impression
holds that night.
that,
I'm
well,
sorry?
There weren't too many wrestling holds that night. I think right in the beginning, they Bruno Superstar shoved Bruno into the corner, and then Bruno reversed it and gave him an arm drag. The crowd went crazy, but there weren't that many actual wrestling holds in that match.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't what Graham did.
Right.
That wasn't his style. It might have been Bruno's style, but then again, many Bruno matches ended in blood and disqualification, where he would kick and punch, do all kinds of stuff to his opponent, but he never got called out on it. Think
Right.
about it.
Right. And that Baltimore ring was murder, from what I hear. It was a boxing ring, right, George?
Oh, well, that's how the early rings were. And also, too, just to take it from me, we used to nail on concrete. There were never pads around the ring. So when I tossed the ring, they would hit the floor, concrete floor. They didn't hit a padded mat. My knees were permanently calloused from kneeling on the cement floor, trying to photograph, trying to keep low enough to stay out of the people's way. So I had to be on my knees on the concrete. Today, it's really good. You got padded. Photographer, you got padded under his knee.
Exactly. George, if people give you shit that you were in their way, hey, get the hell out of my way.
Once in a while, and you still hear it, But I understand. That's why I never stayed in one particular spot and just stood up and did it. I would be low to the ground and move around so that I wouldn't be blocking the same people all the time.
Yeah, of course. But go ahead, Danny.
I was going to say, did anybody? I mean, did they just think they were coming that night to see another Bruno Billy Graham match?
It's a Saturday night. You're coming to see your man Bruno. You weren't thinking anything other than that. You were coming to see a nice match on a Saturday night. That's what you were doing.
So let me ask you a question, because I'm a numbers guy. I attach everything to numbers. So with Ivan Koloff and Bruno, assume that that match, the shock factor was a 10. What was the shock factor in Baltimore that went after the referee counted Bruno out?
That would be maybe 8 or 9, because
it was that much.
Yeah, but the people didn't revolt or really go crazy. That's what they were afraid of. And even when Koloff won, the people, it was more of
they were just in shock. They were silent.
You were silent. You were in shock.
That one was a shock, but Baltimore, we thought, they said they're not going to let that. They'll take the belt away. And by the time,
because they would do that at different times.
Yes, and by the time you saw it on television, everybody was home, so they weren't going to tear the building apart or try to kill Superstar.
Yeah.
But I did notice that Superstar got out of that ring very, very quickly. I did notice that.
He turned and ran. And then I almost followed him to the back at that time.
I think Jack Davis beat everybody to the dressing room. The referee, he got the hell out of there.
Just to get away from Graham for a moment, I was at ringside Madison Square Garden when Bruno wrestled Stan Hansen. And then when he cracked the vertebrae in his back. And when the next match came, Vince McMahon Sr. came to ringside and says, George, I need you to drive Stan Hansen out of the building. So in the middle of the show, it was the main event would go on at 9:20. Show started at 9:20. So it still really was the middle of the show. And I drove Stan Hansen out of the building, out of the garden to the hotel so that he would escape the crowd. Again, they were afraid of what would happen to Stan Hansen if the people got into him,
Now that we got George here, because we can always do a show on Superstar. No disrespect, we love him. He's in my book. The favorite time was when he was champion. But I want to ask you, George, because you were there for both of these events. What had more heat, Bruno against Arion or Bruno against Zbyszko? Because they were both crazy, crazy heat.
That's a good question. But if you really want to say it, Bruno against Zbyszko was in Shea Stadium, or Bruno against Arion was in Madison Square Garden.
Mm-hmm.
Which of the two was the larger venue?
Right.
So I would say Bruno and Zbyszko, because Bruno got turned on by his protege. Arion was his friend, and he turned on him, but Zbyszko was his protege. So
didn't Larry get shot at? I mean, he said he got shot at. He said he had to hide in trunks of cars to be driven to arenas. The heat was that bad on him.
Yeah, but that's what you had to say back then too.
Right.
So do you really know that?
So maybe he embellished a little bit then.
I think maybe just a little.
A little bit.
But
you're right. It sounds great.
But I would definitely say it was Bruno and Zbyszko was a more the fans were more into it than Bruno and Arion, though that was good.
Without a doubt. Now, because you can see Backlund, they threw the Samoans at him when Bruno and Zbyszko were in the Garden. It's like, we don't need a top like Patera or Duncombe, just throw the Samoans at Backlund, each one successive month after the other, because you got Bruno and Zbyszko. Everybody's coming to see that.
See, but they had nobody else around at the time too. The Samoans being big, being size they were a good opponent as a fill-in. They were a good fill-in opponent for any champion at any time, and that's what they used them for. Other than the tag team, they would always do single matches against Bruno or against Backlund.
Now that match Sika had when he came off the top rope with the headbutt, that was a damn good match because Backlund looked like he was done.
Yeah, but you also knew, these are tag team guys. They're not going to win. That's right. What you have in your head. I don't care how good he went. And he was, but he was still just a tag team guy.
Exactly.
They used to do that in the NWA, right? With the Road Warriors would go up against Ric Flair separately, and you knew they weren't going to win because they're tag team guys. But each of them were pretty imposing.
I remember telling Hawk, I was in Philadelphia. Hawk against Ric Flair, great match, and I remember telling Hawk, I said, you should be a single. No disrespect to Joe Animal, but you should be a single. You'll be amazing. You'll be really, really good. People will really be behind him. And he said, I can't leave Joe. He didn't ever want to leave the partner. But if you think about it, Hawk would have been a great singles champion. Just his stature.
Yeah, he was very good on the mic. I enjoyed listening to him.
The way he talked, but just his whole thing, he could have been a great babyface. People would have been into him.
Oh, yeah.
Lot. But he said he couldn't leave Joe. And this was after Animal had gotten hurt, and then Hawk was doing a thing with the Power Warriors with a Japanese fella. And he says, no, I got my partner in Japan. I said, you don't need a Japanese partner. You need to be alone. See, Hawk, of all the guys, I was closest with Hawk. He would come to my son's baseball game, my son's hockey game, his football game. Whatever it was, he was there. He would come to Brooklyn. I lived in Brooklyn. He'd come to Brooklyn, and he would come to my friend's bar, and he would sit there and talk to everybody. I mean, he loved.
Wow.
Yeah.
He died way too young, too.
Yeah, that was a big loss.
He and Nikolai lived together for a while.
I really didn't know.
Yeah, he and Hawk, because they were very close.
He was my favorite. I mean, depending on the decade and when it was, had different favorites. But as far as friends, Superstar, yeah. The Hawk, more than anything, yeah. Because of what he did and how he acted and how he took care of my kids. He really did.
Yeah, you gotta
amazing.
love that. Yeah.
That reminds me of Davey O'Hannon saying that Baron Cicluna babysat his kids. I can only imagine that. Like, parents, what if he took out a foreign object if they misbehaved? Like,
Yeah, Hawk would tell my son, call me Uncle Hawk.
Uncle Hawk. That's so
Beautiful.
cool.
Yeah.
You know, did they do they did a return match, right? Bruno and Graham in Baltimore the next month. Is that correct?
Yes. 2 referees.
I was.
And then
I didn't even know that.
Bruno ended up punching Jack Davis in the jaw by accident. You know, that's like
Probably a receipt from the previous month.
But now, George, you were at the first match when Bruno wrestled Graham in the Garden.
Yes.
What was that like? That looked like an explosion. I saw it on television.
That was in June, right?
June 27th. Yes.
See, again, you know your dates, you know your times, you know your opponents. I really don't know everything like that. To me, I did so many matches, so many times. It's become one big blur. I remember different instances, but I can't remember June 28th who was there and who was on the card. And today, even today's fans, they can recite every WrestleMania, what match was on and who was there. I can't. Everything becomes one big.
I just remember how I felt. That's what sticks with me. Like when I went to my first match with Bruno and Tanaka, April 26, 1968, Island Garden. I had to look that up. I didn't remember the date. I went up looking it up. But I remember when they collided in the middle of the ring. I thought like I was in the middle of an earthquake. You could see the sweat, come off of them, and they both go down. And that's another one, like another ending you'd never see, where Bruno got up at 9.999 and Tanaka stayed down. Another finish you never see today.
Yeah. Tanaka was really good, but like we mentioned earlier, but the Samoans, you always thought of Tanaka as a tag team guy.
Yeah, he and Fuji, without a doubt, they were great.
Tanaka was.
He looked like a block of granite, as you know. Geez, what a monster!
Yeah, and he was really good. As far as wrestling goes, he was really up there. Really good, and he doesn't get the credit he deserves.
The first time I went to a live show, some idiot, because they didn't have guardrails in Baltimore, he came out of the ring and he hit him, and Tanaka just looked at him and gave him that shot. And George, I ain't bullshitting. 4 rows, that guy's airborne.
Yeah, well, you mentioned stanchions. There was never stanchions or any kind of a barricade around the ring. People, before every match, you would run to the corner to try to get an autograph.
Yeah.
You pay for it. The kids would run. Anybody would try to get an autograph. Put your hand up and try to get it signed, and you did. And Albano, I can't tell you the number of times I would see Albano. He said, okay, let me sign for you. And he'll sign their thing. And then he rips it up. He rips up all the autographs. Yes.
Now, George, confirm this rumor. I understand you used to drive Lou around too, and Blassie.
Oh, that's another one, of course. The night of a garden show, at the hotel, I would meet Lou, Captain Lou, Fred Blassie, and the Grand Wizard, who was really my first friend, who introduced me to everybody and made it possible for me to do what I do. He's the first guy I mentioned. But that's another story. I would meet all three, and I would drive the three of them to Madison Square Garden, along with whoever was in the main event against the champion at that time.
Wow.
And as we drove, Albano would put on the show. He would, as soon as he hit the car, he was on. He would yell at people, point and yell and curse and shout. And they would rock my car. They like crazy, and I would itch up, try to get them out of the way. He said,
He
"Yeah,
could have
no,
charged admission to your car.
yeah." But this happened every month. I would take them along with the main event, whoever was in the main event. If it was Blassie's guy, it was Blassie's guy was in the car. If it was the Wizards guy, the Wizards guy was in the car. But I can't remember exactly what the date and all these happened. But I would take them all from the Garden.
Now, George, please tell us, how did Ernie get you into the business? How did he get
Oh,
you in?
see, I was at Sunnyside Gardens taking pictures. And so some guy said, "You must take great pictures. You got a great camera. Let me see them." So the next time I went, I brought photos with me. And I met this guy. I met him again. He was sitting there. He said, "Oh, these pictures are great. Would you like to work for me?" I didn't know what that meant. Okay, work for you. Let's see. What do you mean? "Oh, I work for Ring Wrestling. You can use somebody." So that's how I got involved. And then he brought me downstairs to the dressing room, and he introduced me to Arnold Skolin. And he said, "This is going to be my new photographer." He said, "Oh, so Skolin said, yeah, okay." He says, hey, kid, just, you can do anything you want, but just stay out of the way." And that was my instruction. Stay out of the way. And at the same time, I met the Grand Wizard. We started talking, and he was with beautiful Bobby and handsome Jimmy Valiant.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
gentleman. She was gentleman Jim Valiant at that time. And we started talking, and he went then a couple weeks later, I went to Philadelphia he says, "You got to come to TV." I went to TV. And he went and took me to see Vince McMahon Sr. and introduced me to him and said, "If we need anything, Vince, this is the guy. I want to introduce you to him." And Vince said, "Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you." And that's how I met. And I became anybody that the Wizard had, he introduced me to. At that time, he might have had Blackjack Mulligan, I think. And then I went to Charlotte a couple weeks later, and Mulligan was in Charlotte. And they were giving me a hard time. Well, they didn't know me, and saying that's just the way it was. And Mulligan was there, and he saw me. He says, "Come here." And in the dressing room, he says, "This guy belongs in here. Everybody be good to him." And that's how I got into Charlotte from
Wow.
Mulligan. But it was because of the Wizard's introduction.
Very good.
Yeah.
Were you there the night Mulligan was stabbed in Boston, George?
No, I wasn't there. I went to Boston a couple times with Superstar, depending on who his opponent was. And I remember seeing I want to say the Iron Sheik, but I meant the real Sheik.
Yeah, Ed.
The Sheik against Morales in Baltimore, when the Sheik was not on the regular territory WWF. He just came in and did a special. But I wasn't there when Mulligan got stabbed. I don't know how many, 50-something stitches or something in his stomach. And that's when around the ring, they put plexiglass that they would use for the hockey games. They enclosed the ring. That's the first place that people couldn't get to the ring. It's an enclosure.
Because they say Monsoon saved his life. He threw the guy aside and wrapped a towel around Mulligan and kept him from bleeding to death.
Yep.
But Bruno apparently really liked Mulligan because they got him a quick payday, like 3 months later, 1-minute match in the Garden because he needed the money. He had been out of work. How the hell are you going to work? You know?
Yeah. Well, he was everybody I met was nice, always nice, because, well, I did what I did, and they respected me or whatever. I was a kid. I was the same age as many of them, or even a little younger than some, and older than others.
But George, you were everywhere because you didn't just go to the Garden. We'd see you at the TV tapings, both Philadelphia and Allentown. It's like, something big's happening. There's George. So something good.
People would say that. I would come out. I wasn't at ringside for every match. I was at ringside when a new guy came into the area to get pictures. I would be at ringside. Or when something seemed like it was going to happen, I would be outside. And honestly, nobody ever told me, don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. I did what I wanted to do, and that's how I did it.
You had the trust of the people in charge, the generals. So you had to be doing it right. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And we appreciate
I wanted
it.
to ask you guys about Billy Graham, though. That previous transitional champions was like Co-op had 21 days, and Stasiak had what, 9 or 10.
Yeah.
But Superstar got 200, I think 296. And he knew to the exact date when he was going to lose the title, correct?
Well, it's been said that he was told when Backlund was going to be champ, and leading up to it, he started. He wasn't too happy about the whole story, but there was really. But he knew there was nothing he can really do. There's a story going around that he wrestled Bruno right towards the end, told Bruno to pin him, and because he couldn't see giving it to Backlund. But Bruno said, "No, I can't do that. I can't do that." But I don't know how true that is.
Yeah, we'll never know. That was a cage match at the Spectrum, George. Yeah, he said, just knock me out. You go out of the door, and it's like, yeah, Bruno wasn't going to do that. Jeez.
Did he say, like, please, Billy, don't know? Because Bruno didn't want to deal with that again, right? As far as being the champion. That was the last thing.
Right. That's another thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bruno was a walking, like a medical enigma. His skeleton had to just, if you saw an x-ray of it, it would be like, how is this man walking? Jeez.
See, growing up an Italian kid in Brooklyn, Bruno was my idol. I mean, come on.
Same thing.
Bruno was my idol. And I remember being in Madison Square Garden. I was there when he wrestled Buddy Rogers. 47 seconds. I was
Okay.
I was in the blue seats way up top in Madison Square Garden as a fan with my friend and his uncle who took us to the garden to see. And at that time, you had to be 14, and we weren't even 14. But the garden, you had to be 14 or older. That's how they was. We weren't even 14. But we went with his uncle, and we went in, and we sat in the blue seats, which was like the second or third level promenade. And it was Bruno against Buddy Rogers. And I want to say 47 seconds. It was May 63, May 17th, I want to say.
Right.
You got it, George.
Correct. Yeah.
May 17th. I remember that one. See, May 17th, 63. And I think it was 47 seconds. And my friend was a Buddy Rogers fan. And I hated Buddy Rogers at the time. And we got into a little tussle up on the blue seats because my guy finally won. He would always rank on me that my guy's no good. His Buddy Rogers, he was a Buddy Rogers fan, and the Graham brothers, Dr. Jerry and Eddie Graham, were big at that time too.
Well, Bruno almost broke him in half.
Mhm.
And the over-the-shoulder backbreaker, it's like you heard all the stories. They said Buddy Rogers had a heart attack and all. It's like bullshit. Because if you look at the results, Buddy Rogers was wrestling a couple of weeks later. Yes. Bruno almost broke the man in half.
Yeah, so nobody knows the real story other than those who were involved. And anybody who says they know doesn't know, for real.
Right.
Very good.
Yeah, they're just speculating. But I want to use this example real quick. I've used this before. So, obviously Billy knew that he was going to drop the belt at a certain date, or, that's what we've been told. But I really feel like that he performed so well. I use the example of, you get hired as a temporary worker and you're told you're going to get a 10-month, you have a 10-month temporary job, and then we're going to replace you. And you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to be so damn good that there's no way they're going to replace me. And at the end of the 10 months, I mean, you did everything and then a little bit more, and yet they still replace you.
But the thing is, they were afraid of what Superstar would do.
Is that what it was?
Okay. They didn't feel that they had control over him. He was doing his own thing on. Now everybody does their own thing, TV show or movie or whatever. but he was getting a lot of people who were non-wrestling fans involved. And he was doing things that a wrestler didn't do at that time. And they were afraid, how can we control this guy? They wanted to have somebody who they can control. They've always wanted to have somebody they can control.
Sure.
So just wanted more of a company man then.
Yeah. So, but it was their company. So yeah, yes,
Right,
that's what
right.
that's what you want. They were afraid that he would turn things around or do something that was not in their head, in their thinking.
That's why a lot of people talk about turning him face, that they should have done that. But the problem
He didn't have
was
to turn. He just was becoming on his own.
he was a cool, popular heel, but he did beat the most beloved champion in the history of wrestling. So it's like, how are we going to make him the champion? I think those old timers did not think clearly.
See, but it was, again, we're talking 1977, disco era, and he was part of the era of that time. He was perfect for that time. Bruno's time had passed him. Bruno in his trunks, and as good as he was, you had seen it and seen it and seen it. Now you got a guy who's a today kind of guy. And they were afraid of what could become. Because remember,
And they weren't wrong, because he just up and left Thanksgiving 78. He missed a lot of bookings. He just said to hell with it, and he was done. He just walked away.
yeah, but
He was never the same after that, though, right? I mean,
well,
when he came back with the
Well,
karate.
that's what I want to ask George. How was he? Did you get to talk to him as much when he returned with the shaved head and the karate gimmick?
yeah, I did, but prior to that, couldn't get in touch with him. He wouldn't talk to anybody. He really wouldn't. I spoke to him maybe twice in that time that he was away, and I want to say he was in bad health. That he wasn't himself at that time. So when he came back, he needed the money. So he came back with the karate gear and a karate style, because he was no longer the same muscular size that he was prior.
Right.
And you have a picture of him, I believe, with the Grand Wizard and myself in the karate gear.
Yeah, Monsoon reported him dead in the Philadelphia Journal in '82.
Yeah, I think you have a picture, or maybe the first time I sent it to you. Wrestle in Action magazine.
I love that magazine cover. That was great.
Oh yeah, that was great. That's fantastic.
That was ingenious. The superstar chiseled out of granite on the top of the mountain. That was perfect.
Yeah, I did that.
You did that, George? You drew that?
No, I'll take that back. I didn't draw that, but I said superstar. I want a picture of superstar on the mountaintop. It was Mid-Atlantic Wrestling was doing a program like that, and myself and Vince McMahon were involved with that wrestling action.
They gave you credit for some of the photography in it. They did do that.
I didn't write my name in it. I put my name I gave myself some credit along with other people, but I did the whole thing myself, wrote it and did all the photos.
Beautiful. Oh, as fans, we loved it. That was a great magazine.
You had to order it through the mail. It was advertised on the TV.
And the first one took forever to get to you. That was the pain in the neck. It was like, what? I see more of it on television, because here it is. I still got mine all these years later.
Yeah.
Hold that up a little bit, Nikita. Let me see that.
You got the picture of that.
Wow.
Yes. The one on the inside, George? Let me see.
I think it's Superstar in the centerfold, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. There he is.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, if they trusted you, that says a lot. Here's some great Baltimore shots too. If you can make it out, these were taken by George, obviously, because he was there.
Yeah.
And it was, look, the only reason they didn't tear the building apart was because people figured, they'll take that away. That ain't gonna work. He's gonna lose the belt tomorrow. State Athletic, but they said, no, you can't do it. Maryland's got a rule. So Bruno's got to get the belt back. And I think Bruno had more popularity going after the guy that stole the belt from him because they were selling out every place.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. That night you were talking about before Graham dropped the belt to Backlund, they turned away. It's been confirmed 10,000 that night at the Spectrum. Turned away.
Wow.
See, but then at that time in the Garden, it was this complete sellout all the time, and then they would sell out the Felt Forum, which was a theater behind the Garden, for closed circuit. You sat in the seat, watched it on a screen. That was before pay-per-view, before there was such a thing as pay-per-view. They had it on the screen at the Felt Forum at the theater, which is it's still there. It's the theater in Madison Square Garden.
Really? Nice.
They would have the match. People would buy tickets for that, and that would sell out too.
Now, George, did you get to see Bruno up? I mean, did you get to interact with him after the broken neck? Could you see there was much of a difference after that? Because obviously he had to be hurting.
Well, when he came back, he made sure he was healed, but he still was a little, I want to say shaky, but knowing that something could happen to him if his opponent didn't handle him correctly. Well, what had happened is Stan Hansen, when he went to body slam him, I'll put my hands up, he, instead of holding his back and holding his waist and bringing him down, he lifted him by his waist and tossed him from his waist with no back support. And that's how the vertebrae broke. Usually you'll support somebody with your right hand. You might grab around with the left hand and toss and throw down. Hansen just grabbed him around his waist and just tossed him, and he just jarred him out.
To come back from that is amazing. No question about it. Because a lot of people say, wrestling this, that, they don't believe it. It's like that man had ruptured vertebrae. That's no baloney. That was the truth.
Yeah.
And then he did come back 2 months later because they were pestering him.
How did he even do that? That's I can't even comprehend how he could have done that.
Who did he come back and wrestle after Hansen?
Hansen at Shea Stadium. Well, he had a couple of tag matches to warm up.
Yeah. But who was the opponent after Hansen?
Well, no. Well, he was out of commission until Shea Stadium. Putski wrestled Hansen the next month to fill in.
Yeah, but then usually one followed another. Who came in after Hansen? I don't remember.
Well, Bruno had the return match from the Shea Stadium. Then they had the cage match in August, and then it was Bugsy. Well, no, not Bugsy. That's 76. Then it was on to Koloff. Koloff started coming in after that point.
Okay, so it was a guy he was used to having been around forever and knew it was going to be no problem wrestling them. That's what I'm talking about.
And Nikolai and Hansen, or Stasiak, Nikolai and Stasiak. So, yeah, he knew them and he could work with them.
Yeah.
George, you're lucky. You've seen it all, man. You've really been in the middle of it.
Well, it's been a long time, over 50 years.
And you're almost as well known as any figure in professional wrestling.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely, and you are appreciated. I got to ask
very
you.
Much so, yeah. Very much so.
Do you still talk to Frank Amato?
No, I haven't spoken to Frank in quite a few years.
I always enjoyed his work as well, and seemed like you two were very close, always talking at ringside.
Yeah, we were very close. And then he just fell out of it, and we just drifted apart like it happens for no real reason. I had no animosity, nothing like that.
Yeah. Well, it does go on, and sometimes people just mean to stay in touch and they can. But George, what would you say your best moments were in wrestling? What were your favorite?
Well, I just came back from Las Vegas for WrestleMania. I've been to every WrestleMania.
Wow.
Been to every WrestleMania. Just came back. So one of my favorite memories, we're talking a lot. I can narrow it down to decades. That's as best I can do. To me, Bruno was my guy in the beginning. As I said earlier, Italian from Brooklyn, Bruno was my guy. Bruno leads to superstar, 70s superstar, 80s Ric Flair. He was, and today you see Ric Flair on. He doesn't have that same appeal, obviously.
No,
well,
definitely not.
He's lost the aura that he had, but he was tremendous in his day. There was nobody, and I'm saying nobody, better than Ric Flair in his day and his time. People today only know what they see of Ric Flair for the last several years.
I mean, he kept up an insane schedule for years as the NWA champion. When you look at his travel, it was crazy.
Yeah. So
you don't think Pete Sanchez could have beat him?
In the Garden, and I remember taking a picture. I had seen him in Charlotte right prior to that, and that same night, the Garden had the circus, and there was a sign. The circus stuff was in the back of the Garden, and there was a sign that said, I had it on tip of my tongue. I feel bad. Greatest show on earth. That's what the circus was, Ringling Brothers, the greatest show on earth.
Yeah.
There was a sign on a truck, and I brought Ric Flair to the sign, and he points to the sign, greatest show on earth. I still remember taking a picture of that night when he was against Pete Sanchez.
All right, George, just give us a roundabout guess. How many pictures do you think you've taken over the years?
There's no way I can calculate that, because we'll start with today. Today, you press your finger down and you shot off 300 photos in no time. Back in the day,
you can see what you did. Not like years ago, you had to wait for the
change, and you can make adjustments. Back in the day, you had 36 exposures on a roll of film. And you really make sure when you took that picture that you did it correctly, and because you're paying for every blank, even if it was no good, you're paying for that, But what we were getting at, my favorites, after Superstar, I said Ric Flair in the '80s, but then if you're watching it, you had to be enamored with The Rock and Steve Austin.
Mm-hmm.
What they did.
Mm-hmm.
They took it to another level. I mean, they were for their time, and there's nobody that I've seen people go crazy for Roman Reigns. I don't know that Roman Reigns is as good as what I used to see with The Rock and Austin and anyone prior to them. After The Rock and Austin, I got no one else. Okay, well, I will have to say Hulk Hogan. If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, and people put down Hulk Hogan, if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, we would not be talking today.
Probably right. I agree.
I mean, he was the guy. He was the one who cemented it all and brought it to the public. He went out. He was the next step. Really was. Can you say Roman Reigns is as popular as Hulk Hogan in his day? Come on.
I hated to see it, but you're right. It had to change. Everybody, Chief was getting old. Bruno, Gorilla, they were all getting old, and it's like, okay, Hogan's doing his thing. They got Saturday Night Main Event and all this other MTV. How can you argue with it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's another one who's lost his aura, like Flair. People forget how you, even if the match was no good, at the end he would cheer and wave to the people, and that's what you remembered. He won. That was it, and you went home happy. That's
It made wrestling fans out of people that never cared about it before.
yeah. It brought it to a different audience.
Yeah,
Right.
Which Graham did in his time, and Hulk modeled himself, 26-inch pythons, modeled himself after Superstar Graham.
without a doubt.
I think several guys did. I think Flair probably took a little bit. I think Jesse Ventura definitely took a little bit.
Jesse Ventura was a second-rate Superstar Graham.
He was like when you go to Walmart, you see the great value, or the great value products. They're not quite the real thing, but
he didn't have the jive Superstar did. I was never a Ventura fan. George never was.
Well, he was good in his time, and for what he did, he was really good. But he was there's no way you can compare them. Something was lacking. Though there was nothing lacking in him if you see him, but to compare the two, something was lacking.
Yes.
I have to ask George a question, Nikita, real quick. George, you were there at the Garden for Bruno and Buddy in '63. This is before you started working. Yeah, I've been doing podcasting for 5 years. I never ever thought that I would ever do anything like this. And my very first guest was Dominic DeNucci, and I am like, I've become like a 13-year-old kid again. It's like, holy crap, I'm interviewing Dominic DeNucci, who I grew up watching, and even now, like the enthusiasm of doing this has never worn off. Like no matter who it is, like when I interviewed Patera or Jimmy Valiant, I'm still that fan at heart. Was that the way it was with you when you were doing your photography? That no matter what, first and foremost, you were that fan, and like the whole thing was surreal to you.
Yeah, because I was doing something that I liked, but I didn't. I had no envision of doing it. I just fell into it. It wasn't something that I went and pursued.
Right.
Paul Lee went and pursued it and became great at what he did or does. But I didn't pursue it. I just fell into it, and then I enjoyed it so much. Like today, I do a lot of celebrity photography, red carpet, concerts, shows. That's what I do.
Wow.
Great.
I do a lot of that. But and I'll take the picture if they're looking at me. If Kim Kardashian is looking at me, I got the picture. For wrestling, I had to make the picture. The picture wasn't made for me just to stand there and take, look here. I had to actually go and make the photo. And that's what made it so different than anything else that I've done.
Beautiful. George, I have to say publicly, you did me the greatest favor of all time. The shot for the book was #1, but before that, in '98, we were at a stadium in Augusta, New Jersey. It was Bruno as the referee. Dominic was wrestling Nikolai, and I was there as the manager, and you got shots, and you put them in your magazine. Somebody comes running up to me a year later. It's like, look at this. I'm like, holy shit. I couldn't have paid George to do better for me. I mean, thank you, George. I still have that.
Oh, come on, and you're welcome. At certain times, I did a lot of magazines. So I made sure to put as many different people as I could. I couldn't fill it up with the main event guys all the time. And I would take care of the undercard guys because I seen them every day. I mean, that goes back to the days when I did the programs for the Garden, for the WWF. I would put Johnny Rods and Jose Estrada and Francisco Flores.
Yay!
I remember him.
Whoever else came to mind, I would make sure Don Serrano. I would make sure I put their picture in there because I seen these people and I felt bad because they would look through it and they weren't there, I felt bad. So I would make sure that I took care of everybody.
That's beautiful.
Took care of the big
That ought
guys.
to be very much appreciated too, I would imagine.
Yes, everybody wants their work to be noticed because they give up the body. There's no way around it. You're just going to take a pounding.
Yeah.
And before we sign off, I got to give a big thank you to Mitch Seinfeld because he made this possible. He was the booker.
Thank you,
for George.
Mitch. Yes, thank you, Mitch.
Mitch, our buddy. We love
And I
him.
quickly have to thank Lawrence Laza Johnson, who was listening from all the way down under in Australia and gave us a $5 super chat. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. From the land down under.
Well, Mitch, I remember going to Mitch's shows, and I put Mitch's shows in the magazine also, depending on what it was. And I told him he should be a promoter today.
People with passion. That's it, George. You got to get in there. And hey, you see what he did with QVC. I mean, it's funny because I sent him a little. It was a Brooklyn street fair all the way back in 95. And Mitch was demonstrating that chopper. My wife, Victoria, loves it. She's got a couple of them. Because I always send a video. I said, Mitch, look, Christmas. She's using the chopper. I'm no bullshit, people. It's great. It's the best thing you could buy. So when he shows like he's at BJ's and people are buying 3, I said, you're going to love it. They will love that chopper.
Yeah, he mentioned to me that my son Joseph is in one of your videos.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's beautiful. I can send you a copy, George.
My son was helping Mitch the street fair at.
All right, then I know who it is. He said, Joseph, get me another box. Okay, I can send you a copy if you want it.
Yeah, he mentioned that.
Years and years ago. Why? God, 95. Phew.
95?
Well, guys,
yes.
That was a year or two ago.
May 7th of 95. Yes.
That's 30.
I'm crazy, George. I have all these memories, dates in my head. I'm like that guy Sheldon on Big Bang Theory. Only for me, it's wrestling, not science.
Well, there's a lot of people, a lot of true fans who really remember, but they remember it because they rewatch these things over and over again. I never had the opportunity to rewatch stuff.
Too busy. That's it.
And that was it. And I was on to the next magazine based on the new pictures that I just took.
Well, Mitch was gracious to get you here, and we thank you, George, because it was gracious of you to take the time. We enjoyed the stories, and thank you for all you've given to pro wrestling and its fans.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time.
I echo those comments 1,000%. Nikita, it's nights like this that make me proud to be a professional wrestling fan, to be able to chat about something that happened 48 years ago, nearly a half century ago. And we still talk about it with the same passion. That just shows how great professional wrestling is, right?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to go back to what you said. Dominic Danucci was a good friend of mine. He was really, really.
Oh my God, I love Dominic.
He was a great guy. Man, he ate at my house several times. When they did the local shows, I would bring them to my house at 4:00 in the afternoon so they could eat before the show. My wife would cook for them, and there always was a crew. A guy named Tommy D would have shows.
Oh, I remember Tommy. It's Staten Island, right?
Yeah, he would have shows in Brooklyn and Queens and what have you.
Brooklyn, yep,
And whenever they had the local show in Brooklyn, he would come out. I would put out an invitation to whoever was on the card that I really knew.
Then it was 79, right after that picture you took. The truck didn't show up, so they had to just use mats and put those like theater stanchions around as a ring, because the ring truck couldn't get through in the damn blizzard.
Oh,
that was Tommy D show.
Yeah, I remember in the Tommy D show at a place called OLPH when the ring truck didn't show up, and they took out mats from the gym, and they did a whole show wrestling on the mats.
The show must go on. That's it.
Always, right? Always.
Yep.
Yeah, Dominic's a
And
great guy. I have all the love in the world for Dominic.
oh,
But I
Dominic,
want to thank everybody who joined us tonight.
Dominic taught Cactus Jack.
Frederick.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Dominic
Yes.
taught Cactus Jack and Shane Douglas. And
Yes.
there was another one
Yes,
too.
he gave back even after his days in the ring were over.
Well,
Just-
what they used to do is Cactus Jack used to put up the ring for Tommy D. And Dominic was on a lot of Tommy's shows. And Dominic would take him in the ring in the middle of the afternoon and show him holds and show him takedowns and show him things. And that's how Cactus Jack basically learned the beginning parts of his repertoire.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So want to tell everybody to hit the subscribe buttons. And again, thank you, Lawrence Johnson from all the way from Australia for that $5 super chat. There is some excellent, and there's some very, I call it a treasure trove of excellent interviews and content on this channel. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's like literally a Hall of Fame of wrestling. We'll be back next week to take you on another awesome trip in the wrestling Wayback Machine. So for the great Nikita Brezhnikov and for Hall of Fame photographer and wrestling icon George Napolitano, this is Benny Scala, the one and only player, also the poet laureate of the Monte The Pharaoh YouTube channel, leaving you with this. April 30th, 77. Oh, what a night. The folks of Baltimore witnessed quite the sight. Nights like this, when it was real, remembering with love, we will always feel. Thank you and good night.
Well, thank you guys for taking the time, and I
God
really
bless,
enjoyed
George.
myself.
Bye-bye.
Bye.